As I discussed earlier in the program, the Biden re-election campaign sent Vice President Kamala Harris to Florida to lash out against Florida's law protecting life that takes effect today. It's the heartbeat bill. Now, the president's re-election campaign has pushed this whole issue. I mean, they are wanting to make the 2024 election about abortion. Now, here's the only way they will succeed in that, all right? If Republicans are silent. Because if they'll have a conversation about it, they'll be able to show the American people who's really extreme. Well, joining me now to discuss this and much more is Dr. Ben Carson. He's the former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, a 2016 Republican presidential candidate, and the pioneering former director of the pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. He is now the founder and chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute. Dr. Carson, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for being such a courageous voice these days.
Well, I thank you, and I appreciate you for always encouraging Republicans to embrace the life issue and stand for the sanctity of life. It's a winning issue if you believe it and you talk about it.
Absolutely. And, you know, I spent most of my professional career as a pediatric neurosurgeon trying to save lives. Frequently, they were premature babies. 26, 27, 28 weeks gestation, sometimes operating all night, sometimes even operating on babies before they were born. I can very much assure you that they're very much alive. Just because they're in the uterus, that does not mean that they're not a living human being, and they can feel pain. And, you know, we have to advocate for them. And we're in a little bit of a tough situation politically if we don't navigate it the right way. You know, there are those like myself who believe that life begins at conception. There are those who say 6 weeks. There are those who say 15 weeks. What we need to do is stop fighting amongst ourselves, recognize we're all under the umbrella of pro-life, and we need to continue the fight. The fact that Roe v. Wade was overturned and put the fight at the state level rather than at the federal level is a good thing, because at the state level, you can have in-depth discussion. You can have in-depth discussions with your representatives. We have a democratic republic, which depends on people being represented correctly. So you can make your feelings known, and we can continue to push for a culture of life, not a culture of death. And I think it's very important in this argument to be vocal and to ask questions of those on the other side, like, well, what is unacceptable to you in terms of abortion? They have a hard time answering that question because they're actually willing to kill babies that are viable outside of the womb. You know, from 6 months on of gestation, we can now have it with technology that will save that baby, it will save that baby's life. So if that baby could be living outside of the womb, why do you have the right to kill the baby because it's inside the womb? And then, as I frequently say, in our laws, if you murder a woman who's pregnant, you get charged with 2 counts of homicide. Why is that? Obviously, our legal system recognizes that life.
Right. Well, in order to ask those questions, you've got to be willing to talk about it. And I think, now I do think, I'm with you. I believe that we should be protecting life from the moment of conception on. That's when life begins. But I also know that in a republic, we have to build consensus. So we just take a page out of the book in terms of how we got to a point where Roe was overturned. We educate, we teach, we show the humanity of the unborn, and we move the public to the right spot. And we keep moving, as we're seeing across the country today. But you have to be willing to engage in the conversation, defend your position, and not be in retreat. And that's unfortunately what's happened, is that in this post-Roe world, many Republicans have lost their footing on this issue. I still believe that if we're willing to talk about it, we are where the majority of the American people are at.
And I think many of us have forgotten that this is the beginning of the fight. Overturning Roe is the beginning of the fight. It's not the end of the fight. We need to continue to educate people. You know, when you allow people to find out what an abortion actually is, particularly in the second and third trimester, where you actually put the forceps into the uterus, grab whatever it can grab, twist and pull, and out comes an arm or a leg. You know, most people are kind of put off by that, and we need to let them know what's going on. You can't just sugarcoat this. This is murder of a human being who has feelings. And as we make that more apparent to people, I think we will move more toward a culture of life. It's interesting that a lot of young people are much more pro-life because they've grown up in an era where we can actually see what's in the uterus. We can't hide that from them.
Right.
They recognize that it's a human being that's moving around that can react.
Well, I'm kind of laughing, chuckling a little bit, Dr. Carson, because we're told as conservatives we're anti-science. We're not the ones that are having a problem with science. Science is very clear on life. The science is very clear on gender. It seems like the other side is struggling with the science.
Absolutely. And, you know, for me as a neuroscientist, you know, I look at that baby from the moment of conception, that brain starts to develop. I mean, we're talking millions of neurons every day. Within a very short period of time, that baby is much more neurologically sophisticated than a snail darter. And yet, look at all these environmentalists running around saying, we got to save the snail darter. How come they're not concerned about the baby?
Yeah, the hypocrisy is stunning. Tomorrow's the National Day of Prayer. One thing I appreciate about you, Dr. Carson, is in any capacity you've served in, including Secretary of Health and Hospitals, didn't hide the fact you're a Christian. And in fact, I remember taking pastors to go to your office to pray with you. You are hosting, the Cornerstone Institute's hosting a National Day of Prayer call tomorrow. How can people participate in that?
They can actually go to the website. They can register, because you have to be registered to be on the call, AmericanCornerstone.org. And we'd like to get as many people praying as possible. You know, when I think about my life and all the things that have happened, just amazing things, I realize a lot of them are the result of prayer and faith in God. And he doesn't force himself upon anybody, but if you will come to him with a humble heart and faith, the sky is the limit.
And folks, I'd invite you to join us in that call. I'm going to be with Dr. Carson tomorrow on that call. You can go to TonyPerkins.com. There's a link to the American Cornerstone Institute, and you can register for that. Now, Dr. Carson, you also have a new book that's coming out with your wife, Candy, The Perilous Fight. You highlight the left's attack on the American family and the devastation that has created for our country. But you don't stop there. You talk about how we can regain our footing in this country by starting with the family.
Well, we have to recognize that we do have an enemy, that we are in a fight, that it is having a very deleterious effect on us. And I give a lot of statistics in the book about two-parent nuclear families and how much better the kids come out, what the advantages are, and the support that a mother and a father can give to each other and how their lives are improved. You know, we seem to have forgotten that. We're getting married much later or not at all. Children are not getting their values from the family. They're getting their values from the internet, from associates. This is not the way it was supposed to be. And particularly, you know, children have developing brains, and children are naturally curious and very impressionable. And if they don't have parents who are Johnny on the spot watching what's going on, they're very likely to be influenced in a negative way.
Right, and by the way, we've looked at it here at the Family Research Council with Dr. George Barna, in that that a worldview is shaped between 15 months of age to 13 years. So those are very, very important times. And again, you make reference to the social sciences, the evidence out there in terms of what is best for a child. But again, the left refutes that, or they deny it. And increasingly, we're finding that they want to stop that type of research because it doesn't tell the story they want told.
Well, what's funny is that whether you look at the right-leaning or the left-leaning research institutions and think tanks, they all come up with the same data. They all show very clearly and distinctly what kind of family environment results in the best outcomes for the children. So they basically have to stick their head in the sand and make up things if they're not going to accept their own data.
All right, so Dr. Carson, we've got a country that's ailing. We have a family structure that is weak. What's the prescription?
Very simple. We need to return to God. We talk about our Creator in the founding document of our nation, that our rights come from God, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when we throw away godly principles of loving your fellow man, of caring about your neighbor, of developing your God-given talents to the utmost so that you become valuable to the people around you, having values and principles that govern your life, and we substitute that for our own statutes and laws and regulations and our own truths, then what happens to us? You see people out there today saying, my truth and your truth. What about the truth? God has given us the truth. We lived by it for a long period of time, and we went from nowhere to the pinnacle of the world as a result of it. And as we've thrown it away, we're descending rapidly also. But it's not too late. We haven't hit rock bottom, and we can turn it around.
But we have to be, number one, we have to have courage. We've got to be bold as believers. We've got to know what we believe and be bold enough to speak it. And that's a part of reading, educating yourself, and of course your book speaks to that, and it gives some very practical steps. The Perilous Fight, how the family has been attacked, but how we can take a stand for truth. And by the way, you're going to be in Baton Rouge at the FRC's Faith and Freedom Chapel on May the 30th for an evening. We're going to be talking about your book. We're going to have a conversation, and people will be able to meet you and get a copy of your book, as well as ask questions.
I'm going to have a good time. We're going to have a good time with that.
So
we're going to, with God's help, I do believe that we can turn this thing around, and I do believe that people are ready for it. And it has to be pretty dark sometimes before people see the light, but I think we're there. And we're ready to shine that light brightly.
I think you're absolutely right, and there is hope, but we have to realize we are the answer. We are a part of the answer. God has placed us here, entrusted us with this moment in time. We have to be faithful to our calling. Dr. Ben Carson, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. I look forward to being with you on the prayer call tomorrow, and to see you in Baton Rouge on May the 30th.
Thank you for being a trooper.
Thank you, sir.